Let's let Wedge wait a little bit. We talked about him enough for the moment. I feel like lunch. No, but wait. This is Violet speaking. I should have explained. Uh, Violet said we can't forget about your therapy. So we got to work on that. And Lance had obediently been working on that left knee. uh, when he could, but there are certain things he couldn't do. Uh, so, if he figured, all right, we'll take a break from this. Uh, Violet said, after all, we've got all afternoon. We don't have any place to go. Elaine's job doesn't start today. It starts tomorrow. So let's just enjoy ourselves here. So, enjoy. That therapy was still pretty darn hard. And this time, Violet decided it was time to straighten that leg all the way out. Lance had not done that yet. He could lift it up, leaving that knee hanging. And, Violet had worked on making sure things were straight and using there was almost a magic in her hands. And she, I'll leave the cat, she would put her hands around that knee and seeming to hardly move her hands at all, she could make it feel better. But now she had to straighten it out, and boy, was that an agony. But as she pointed out, if you're going to ride a bicycle, you're going to have to be able to straighten it out again and again when you pedal. And he said he knew. So she did that a while, and then what was a lot easier, more pleasant, was when Elaine got to working on that right shoulder, both shoulders. She was learning. She was getting good at it. She'd one day get really good at it. Both shoulders, gradually go to the spot that was hurt. That was kind of like her special territory, that shoulder. And she was proud that he could brush his teeth. He couldn't really brush his hair yet, but he was getting much better. So they worked. He got up stood up with the walker and was able to walk. And this time they didn't stay right behind him with the wheelchair. He walked to the far end of the little paradise. It wasn't very big, and turning around was tricky, but he managed, and he came back, and he sat down, and he kind of thought he was done. But Violet said, well, let's go in and have some lunch. And he said, okay. So that meant he had to go a little bit further, and they kind of had mercy on him. They let him sit in the wheelchair and rolled him up the ramp and in there. And they had their lunch, and it was just sandwiches. But Violet said, I think we should switch. I've run out of Brahma. I don't have any more beer, actually, but I've got lots of Richland brew, and I'd like you to try some Richland brew. And he said, okay, I'll trust you on that. She said, did you ever drink ale? And he said, I don't know. Isn't that the same as beer? No, she said. No. Ale doesn't have hops in it. And Richland brew is a pretty special brew. It's unique to this city, and it's made everywhere. It can't be bought. It can't be sold. That would be illegal. But it can be made, and it can be served if you're willing. And I've got lots of that. I brew it myself, of course, like everybody does. Almost every home in Richland, that's an exaggeration. Fully half of the homes in Richland brewed their own ale. It was something the city prided themselves in, and they gave it away. So really, if you went to any house in the city and said, could I please have an ale or even a beer? I mean, a lot of them brewed beer too, and that was also Richland brew. People would gladly serve them up an ale. They wouldn't necessarily bring them into their house, but they'd serve them up an ale. It had been quite a campaign to get that. Richland, the city of free ale, or the city of free beer. One of the problems, though, was that it didn't taste, somebody thought, oh boy, I love beer, I'm going to go there and I'm just going to hang out. Well, it was sour, slightly sour. It was usually served warm. It was uncarbonated, so it was flat. And it wasn't filtered. So it was cloudy. Sometimes yeast would be floating in the top. It was the real thing. And most people weren't so sure about that. Well, Violet explained this stuff to Lance, but he was still up for it. He said he'd like to give it a try. And he did. He said, whoa, that's certainly a different kind of drink. It's sort of like apple cider in a way. It's so different. She said, yeah. She knew, and that was basic. There was no fruit in it or anything. It was just your basic ale. And every household, it was a little bit different. And even the neighborhoods in Richland, connoisseurs could, well, I'm pushing this a little bit, but they could give a pretty good guess at what, if they were blindfolded, at what, or if it was brought to them, what neighborhood that ale came from. Everyone, not just the women, the men too felt that they were alewives. It was quite a campaign to do this because this was giving away something free. Tatus, for example, hated it. Now, Jimmy Carter had made it legal. Before that, it all would have been illegal, so look how far they'd come. But he made it legal, and it took Tatus a while to get used to that too, because Tatus, he didn't like anything to change. He wanted stuff to stay just the way it was. And currently, in Richland, there was a push to do the same thing with beer, with bread. The city of free bread and ale. That was going to be a long shot, and Tatus was holding out against that. That wasn't even capitalism. You can't be giving that kind of thing away. But it was they were fighting it. But on one exception, I'm going on about this for quite a while, but it's different, and it was the topic of conversation at lunch. At Christmas time, a big thing to do would be to go around the city and sing, "Wassail, wassail all over the town, our toast it is white and our ale it is brown." And they, at every house, "Our bowl it is made of the white maple tree, with the wassailing bowl I'll drink to thee." They would go around singing that like carolers, and every house would serve up ale, Richland brew. So anyway, there were people that came to Richland just for that occasion because it was so much fun. There was more than one wassailers had a little trouble finding his way home. So anyway, it made for conversation, and they had a good lunch, and they'd had their healing with the therapy, and now this was their ailing. Now they were going to ale. They were ailing. So they drank some ale, all three of them. Even Elaine had some ale. And then they went back outside, and they were ready for the conversation about Wedge Now.